everyone, welcome back to ThawTalk. Today's episode we have me, Wei Ann. Yes, as you can maybe hear from all of our voices, we're a bit sick because it's just the New Year's. So today's episode is we're going to be talking a bit about vulnerability in friendships. More specifically, being vulnerable to someone new, learning how to open up, and dealing with a lack of trust, which I know some people may have problems with when trying to make friends. So let's talk about what vulnerability is and why it's important in a friendship first. So healthy vulnerability is an essential component of strong connections in trusting relationships. So why is this so? If you're being vulnerable with someone, that means you can trust them with how you feel, in your secrets and all that sort of stuff, right? So this creates a healthy space for the friendship, and it allows the both of you to sort of communicate well and be really open and authentic within that relationship. So in the end, it actually strengthens your friendships and all that. Yeah. So what about you? What do you guys think about vulnerability when it comes to a friendship? How important is it for you guys? When you're talking about close friends, do you normally share a lot about yourself and your secrets and all that sort of stuff?
I think with our close friends, we tend to share a lot of things with each other.
Right.
Maybe with someone new, you have more insecurities and you have that sense of fear that maybe, he's not very trusting, you can't really be vulnerable with that particular person. Maybe to someone new, but not to my close friends.
Right. It's always not being able to open up to someone new. Have you guys, how about you, Cindy? How do you open up to someone new? Maybe before we move into the tips and tricks and all that.
I feel like opening up is a lot about getting closer than you open up.
Right.
It's if you open up too early, then you kind of scared they will go out and tell your secret to other people and stuff.
Because you can't trust them yet. So it's always you're in kind of a weird limbo, because to get closer to this person you need to be vulnerable, but then you don't want to be too vulnerable about it. So maybe let's share some misconceptions about vulnerability. So some people, they're afraid to share their vulnerability with other people because they are afraid that it makes them seem weak, especially in front of people who they aren't close to. But not really, because I feel like being vulnerable is already quite something that requires strength, to share your secrets or to open up with someone. And then another misconception is that vulnerability means sharing every single aspect of your life. No, I feel like that's you don't have to share everything, because I don't think we share everything with even our close friends and our closest family members and all that. Yeah, so vulnerability is really about authenticity and selective sharing based on comfort and trust that you have with the person that you want to share, right? And a lot of people feel scared because they feel they maybe if I tell you a secret or something, then maybe that's a bit weird, right? You have this sort of fear of rejection, and people worry that if they reveal too much about themselves, they may be judged or dismissed by others, which is a very common fear when I feel making new friends for the first or meeting new people for the first time. So it's a common fear. And then another fear is, like I mentioned just now, I feel a fear of being taken advantage of, especially for people you don't know for the first time. Maybe they could spread it wherever they want to. And fear of losing control is another aspect of not wanting to be vulnerable. It's because opening up may feel like you lose control about how one person thinks of you. Because they may have a fixed perspective of you in mind, but then when you're being open with them, then it may completely change their perspective, and then do they still want to be friends with me and all that sort of stuff. So those are just some misconceptions and more of an explanation of what vulnerability is and why people are so afraid of it in a friendship. So maybe you want to share some experiences being vulnerable to someone for the first time. For example, me, I don't really, it's been a while since I made a new friend, so I can't really remember, but it's kind of What do you start them with? I mean, we don't really start off with telling everyone our secrets, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe you get closer to people, so maybe you'll share more conversations, interests. You'll have more you're more closer like, in general.
Yeah.
And then you start opening up more and more. So maybe about your school life first, maybe this friend, that friend, and it starts getting more and more. So it takes a lot of stages for you to actually, for me to get to that stage of opening up and sharing about maybe my feelings or being more vulnerable with someone else. Yeah.
How about you? What's one of the first things that you share about yourself to other people?
I also personally take quite long to be vulnerable to someone. Like even telling like little secrets and stuff is like you need that level of like intimacy.
Yeah.
So you were asking about
like what's the first thing you share?
Oh, what's the first thing?
Yeah. Like I mentioned just now, vulnerability doesn't have to be so deep. It can be more like surface level, like, oh yeah, I did this.
Interest lah.
Interest, right? Yeah. I feel like we mentioned this in a few of our previous episodes. I think one of the good ways to get closer to someone is through your interests. And then even though it doesn't seem like one of like a secret, because vulnerability is a pretty heavy word, right? But sharing your interests can really be seen as being vulnerable and more intimate with someone, and it's a sign of wanting to get closer. Yeah. Right. For me, I think it's also interest. I feel like whenever I see someone for the first time, hi, what do you like? I feel like that's such a weird way to put it, but like, what do you like, right?
What K-drama?
What K-drama? Yeah. What music do you listen to? Yeah. Then and because I love talking about my interests, I love info dumping on my interests. So yeah, that's a quick way to be close friends with me. And that's the way that I show my vulnerability around others. Maybe let's talk a little bit more about again, like the tips and tricks on how to be vulnerable. So first of all, we can't just be vulnerable with everyone. Like, I know you want to be friends with a lot of people, but then also we don't know everyone's character, and some people may not be the friendliest, the most open to when like recepting this I suppose vulnerability, right? So we need to know when and who to be vulnerable with. So it's important to know these, because then you can be more comfortable, right? So you have to be selective in sharing. If like this person seems friendly, then yeah, maybe, right? Yeah, but be vulnerable with people who seem supportive, empathetic and non-judgmental, so that they can listen to you with an open heart and offer their authentic and thoughtful feedback and reactions. And additionally, timing is key. Being vulnerable too early in a friendship can sometimes come across as oversharing or even being pushy. So it's important to build trust and establish a solid foundation first. That being said, if there's something that you really want to share with a friend, it's usually better to go for it sooner than later, because it's all about, vulnerability is all about taking risks and being authentic at the end of the day. So don't be afraid. Don't be too afraid, and just open up when you feel right about it. And I want to talk about this a bit more. Have you met someone who like trauma dumps the first time you meet? Like, oh yeah, my boyfriend just broke up with me, and then yeah. So be careful when you share too much, because then it may make the other party feel uncomfortable. I think everyone has been in that sort of situation, right? What was your situation? Like,
I think it was like family member, like, she recently like, for example, like cheated.
oh, yeah. Was this like someone you just met, or like?
Yeah, just met.
I mean, yeah, it's awkward for everyone.
It's damn awkward. She suddenly told me about it.
Yeah.
It's like, why is she telling me this?
Yeah, like, I'm sorry for you. Or I don't know how to react, but and you, any funny stories?
Funny stories? It's more more of awkward moments.
Yeah.
When you tend to overshare with someone who you're not close with, it tends to become a one-sided conversation. Because the guy just overshares and he talks a lot, but then you're there like. Sometimes you also feel compelled to actually share more about yourself because he's telling you about himself. So, but that's usually not the case. You don't really have to share a lot about yourself if you're not comfortable with it. Just take note that sometimes if someone shares about themselves a lot more after you talk for quite a decent amount of time, then it shows that they are more willing to be more vulnerable with you and they are willing to share their feelings with you.
Yeah, so maybe it's not always a bad thing, I guess.
Depends lah.
Depends case to case on what they're oversharing about, I suppose. You know, sometimes it's really just super awkward. But for those people who overshare, because sometimes I'm an oversharer, sometimes they don't even realize that they're doing it, you know. Sometimes they're like, oh, talk just to talk. Yeah, because once you start, I cannot stop. But anyway, next tip number 2, you need to understand your own thoughts, feelings, and emotions. So vulnerability requires communicating your thoughts, feelings, and emotions effectively. And the first step to doing this involves developing a better understanding of them. And this doesn't happen overnight, unfortunately. It's a long process of learning and experience and all that. So by taking the time to reflect on your own internal experiences, you'll be better equipped to communicate your needs and desires to help others in an open and honest way. So let's say you're feeling hurt by someone or something a friend said, right? And instead of lashing out, you should take a moment to sort of examine what you're feeling. Is it sadness or what's like the emotion? And then once you've identified that emotion, you can then express it to your friend in a calm and constructive way. So that's one important thing about being vulnerable. Like sometimes you need to phrase what you say carefully. It's like connected to the oversharing bit. If you want to say something a bit, don't say it so crudely, you know. So yeah, by doing this, you're not only modeling vulnerability, but you're also giving your friend or the other party the opportunity to respond with empathy and understanding. And it's important to remember that vulnerability is a two-way street, and in order to receive it from others, you first need to be willing to give it to other people. So the way to actually give it is to understand and know yourself better, and then you'll be able to create a deeper and more fulfilling friendship through this sort of communicative process, right? So at the end of the day, it's all communication, right? In a friendship. Yeah. So I feel like sometimes it's hard for people to be vulnerable because they themselves don't really know how to process their own emotions and how to share it with others. To say some people are more emotionally constipated, right? Yeah. I know some people that like, you know, when you hang out with someone and then you can kind of tell that they want to tell you something, but then they're like, they don't know how to get it out, and then they're like, just tell me, man, it's okay, right? I feel like that happens. It happens with me sometimes as well because I just don't know how to say things out. So if you want to be vulnerable, just think of how you want to word yourself properly. And then tip number 3 is to practice compassion when dealing with others. So we already learned how to sort of be vulnerable ourselves, and now we need to learn how to be receptive to vulnerability from others. So we need to offer kindness, empathy, and understanding. And one way to do this is by actively listening. And we shared some tips about active listening in our previous episodes, right? So listen to a friend when they share their struggles and fears with you, because it takes a lot of strength to be vulnerable. So again, distractions away, no AirPods in your ears when you're walking with someone. And case to case, I think people tend to prefer, like some people don't want like help. Like they just want you to empathize, you get what I mean? Like, oh man, that sucks for you and all that sort of stuff, right? So try and understand that person, see where they're coming from. Because sometimes when people give you advice that's not warranted, right? It's kind of like, thanks. I didn't need that. I just wanted to rant or something like that, right? Yeah, but either way, by being receptive to this vulnerability from other people, you create a supportive and caring environment where everyone feels sort of heard and valued, and then you'll show like this is your opportunity to show the other party that yeah, you can trust me and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. But do you guys prefer offering support, or do you like empathize more when like your friends are being vulnerable with you? Like what type of yeah. So like let's say someone I'm having trouble with this, someone's being vulnerable with you. What's your go-to first reaction? Empathy or advice?
I think it depends on the situation.
Empathy lah.
Empathy, right? Okay, so like what if your friend is like, oh man, I've been like really struggling with school and all that. Do you like, oh man, me too? or like, oh, here's some advice.
Oh man, me too.
Oh man, me too, right? But maybe sometimes you're not so qualified to give advice. Because sometimes my friends come to me like, my boyfriend said this to me, and I'm like, I've never had a boyfriend. I don't know how to help you. That sucks, man. Yeah, I know that sort of stuff. So case to case, like, see if you can. Normally, I ask them, do you want advice? Do you want help? You know, right? Before you offer it to them. If not, if I say something that's not really like relevant or useful, then they'll be like, oh, okay, right. Yeah, so our next tip is to express yourself with honesty. So be honest about what you want, and it's okay to ask for help in an already established relationship. Maybe not so much in someone you just met. And it's also okay to say no. So if someone asks you for something, don't feel like you have to oblige just because they asked. So the reason why this is related to vulnerability is because it's like being honest in your actions. Share what's on your mind without censoring yourself or worrying about others' reactions. And you know, vulnerability isn't always easy, but exercising this skill will help to build trust in other areas of life as well. So the conclusion for all of this is that like building trust and connections through vulnerability is actually pretty important when you want to try and form meaningful and deep like friendships, because that's just how you get closer, you know, just sharing things about yourself, trying to offer help and empathy and all that sort of stuff. And maybe by applying and following these tools, you can break down barriers and develop deeper connections to the people you care about. And remember to really listen to them, share your feelings openly, and be open to feedback about showing empathy and kindness, right? So that's more about vulnerability and the tips. And then, actually, there was this thing that I found online. So researchers interviewed adults about making friends in a recent study, and the most important challenge cited was actually a lack of trust. So what that means is people found it harder to put their trust in someone new and fully invest in them as a friend compared to when they were younger. So I think just now our tips was more of like for people we're already friends with. But then maybe now we're moving on to the people who we just met. So the researchers actually theorized that this is why people try to keep in their old circle of friends for as long as possible, given the trust that they have built up over many years. So what's the thing about growing older and then being scared to like share more about yourself? Because I think as kids you kind of just right? You can't just say whatever you want to say, but now we have a sense of, I suppose, we're more conscious of what we say, right? We have greater self-awareness than we had when we were children. And while that's positive, sometimes it also means that we are more aware of the sort of risks of like being judged by others, like, oh man, what if I get rejected and all that. And also, as we grow older, we have that sort of experience with like people breaking our trust. So like when we're vulnerable with someone, maybe they can share that vulnerability with other people and all that sort of stuff. So it's really all about, it's a process of learning, I suppose. Even though you have won the experience being vulnerable to someone, does not mean that this will apply for everyone else. So that's some advice or something that people with trust issues that need to hear, I suppose. Yeah. Then you know, we are often scared by the idea of vulnerability, but I think the most important thing is to embrace it. Yeah. Any word of advice that you guys may have for people who may be dealing with these sort of trust issues, or maybe some experiences that you would like to share?
Just take a leap of faith.
Take a leap of faith, yeah.
Maybe once you get through more of these kind of experiences and you learn from these, I think it's easier for you to handle and see who you can actually talk to and who you can be more vulnerable to once you you're more susceptible to who is actually nice to you. Like you can tell, oh, this guy's actually being nice, or this guy is being caring. Once you know, so it's a process. If it doesn't work out, then you have a falling out with that person, and maybe he shares about your secrets and everything, and then you feel more secluded. You want to distance yourself away from people. You have to also understand that they were once there for you to support you and everything, and you just have a falling out doesn't mean that everyone is the same.
Right.
And it's okay to try with new people. It's not always just one person makes your whole view of everyone in the whole society.
Right. Yeah. So it's all about, I suppose, learning, accepting, and all that. And then another piece of advice that I found online, one user says, you don't have to trust people to talk to them, and even when you start building an acquaintance into a friend, you don't just throw some heavy trust on them from the start. It's all about building the connection, right? So at first, entrust them with something inconsequential, something that if they fail to live up to that trust, it doesn't cost you more than you're willing to live with it. So for instance, ask a person to do a thing at a time, something not important, just for fun. And if they ghost you, or they don't live up to their promise, or they don't respond the way that you want, maybe you learn something about who they are, like what their character is, without really taking any real damage and feeling really hurt about it. And then once you find someone who actually adheres to like what you want from them, like openly accepts your vulnerability and all that, that's when you know like, oh yeah, I can accept this person and all that. Then you can build up your trust with them little by little. At the end of the day is like a gauge of character, I suppose. That's really important when trying to be vulnerable. And it will be slow at first because you have no network yet. They say filter out all the crappy people yourself and patiently try out more people until you find someone who don't feel social interaction with you. And then once you start to get the flow of it, I think it'll become easier and easier. But yeah, this was just a piece of advice from someone for people who may have trust issues and all that. And the most important thing is you should prioritize yourself. Yeah. Yeah. Be a bit selfish in your friendships, Don't feel like you have to be vulnerable for the sake of being vulnerable because it'll get you closer faster and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. I think, okay, this is not related. Is it related? I don't know. But I keep thinking, right, about Kim Kardashian. Then she shared her fake baby photos with her close friends, and then the fake baby photos got leaked.
Oh.
Yeah. I don't know why. I keep thinking about it through this episode. Yeah. Then basically it filtered out her real friends or the snitch or whatever. Yeah. Maybe you could try that. I don't know, man. Yeah, vulnerability is a pretty heavy thing. I mean, to each their own, I suppose. Everyone has their own experiences. So, any last words of advice? If not, we'll wrap it up with a conclusion. I think, just a synopsis. You don't have to be vulnerable with people that you meet for the first time because that's natural. You don't trauma dump or info share so much with people you just met. You can slowly share inconsequential, small little things about yourself and build up that trust with other people. And then at the end of the day, it's really all just about, again, communication. So yeah, it's okay to be vulnerable, and you can take baby steps at it because it's really just a lifelong process of learning how to be more trusting to other people. Yeah. So I think that was all for today's ThawTalk episode. Thanks for joining us. Bye bye.